By the end of this video, you are going to learn exactly how to debate a full public forum debate round through every speech, every single idea, and every single part of the round as a whole. If you don't already know who I am, my name is Vivaan Sadare, and I am a sophomore in high school teaching young debaters and young minds alike exactly how to train themselves for public speaking, public forum debate, as well as many other events in the debate category, and teaching civics and engagement in governance and on a local level. I created this program, Belair Debate Academy, as a way to give students and young minds alike a free way and a free platform so that they can learn and grow in their debate and speech skills completely free of charge with no course or subscription and without having to pay money to their school or to their coaches. Though that's enough about me for now, let's dive straight into exactly everything you need to know about the full PF round. When you first walk into your assigned room for debating, the first thing that you will most likely do is a coin flip if you haven't already done it online or before a round. Now this coin flip can be a little tricky. A lot of times the coin flip may seem easy and it may seem simple, but because of the way that sides work in public forum, you will often have a very complex coin flip that might not be exactly what you have in mind. So as I describe this, make sure you pay close attention exactly to what happens whenever someone flips and they choose a side, so that way you don't get lost on who is who during the round. In public forum, you flip a coin that usually has heads or tails. Now granted, it could be a special coin that doesn't have heads or tails, but the idea is that the coin should have a 50-50 chance of landing on one side or the other. Once someone flips the coin and they win the coin toss, they're the ones who get to pick either their side or speaker order. Now, what that means is that they can either pick between going affirmation or negation, or choosing to speak first or second. Now it's important that you don't confuse some things here. Yes, in a team of two people or a public forum team, there are a first and second speaker. But there's also a first and second speaking order for a round. And so what you need to know, and the distinction you need to make, is that while it is true that each team has a first and second speaker, the coin toss has nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, to do with that speaker order. Rather, it determines the speaker order of the round itself and who gets to go first for their team. Now, once your opponents or you, whoever won the coin toss, have picked their side/speaker order, the other person gets to pick their side/speaker order depending on what the person picked. So for example, if my opposition picked to speak first, then I would have the option to either pick affirmation or negation depending on which side I prefer. Now if you are confused by what any of this means and you have no idea as to what I'm talking about, then I would highly recommend that you go check out my other video, which has a quick introduction to public forum and the basics of what you need to cover. And once you watch that video, come back here for every speech explained, so that way you can get a better idea of how to actually debate in a public forum round. Once the coin flip is done and everyone is ready for the round to begin, you will begin the first speech. The first speech is always given by the first speaker of both teams. And what's important about this speech is that both speakers do not simply go at the same time, but rather the person with the first speaker order speaks first. This first speech of the round is called the constructive speech, and in this speech, you will simply give your case and deliver your arguments. For example, your arguments may be called contentions, and these contentions may be your points in essence, and have arguments that support your side as either aff or neg. What's important to note about the constructive speech is that it's 4 minutes long, and you want to try and utilize as much of the time that you have as you can. Do not leave extra time lying around, and if you happen to finish your constructive speech before your time finishes, feel free to read more arguments, so long as you finished covering that full time. The reason I stress this so much is because judges do not like to see you underutilize your time. They like to see you maximize it, and oftentimes if you go over your own time limit, that'll look a lot better because it shows that you have a lot of content to cover, rather than simply going under the time limit and showing that you don't have a lot to offer for the round. Now to help give you an idea of how a round would actually look like, I'm going to set up a scenario. Let's say you and I are on one team, and our opponents are on another team. Let's just say that you and I are speaking first on the affirmative. That means that we are going first on the speaker order, and we're speaking for the pro side. while our opponents are going second on the speaker order and are speaking for the con side. Since we are the first speaking order, that means that we get the chance to give our constructive first. And so I will claim myself as the first speaker for our team. I will give my constructive speech, and after I give my constructive speech, the opponent's first speaker will give their constructive speech. This will happen after I give mine, so that means that while they're giving their constructive speech, you can easily be preparing for something, or even trying to do something to work against their arguments while they're giving their speech. Though, as you'll see a little bit later, that might not be the best idea, as you'll also want to take notes on their argument in something called flowing. But we can get to that later. For now, all you need to know is that both constructive speeches will happen one after the other, and after both first speakers give their speeches, we will now be getting to something called crossfire. The crossfire is quite interesting because it's not exactly a speech. Rather, it is a chance to question your opponents. And so the crossfire is a 3-minute long period where you and your opponent are able to ask questions to one another and receive answers within the time frame. Now, it's important to note that this is the first crossfire of 3 total crossfires, and so throughout the entire public forum round, there will be a total of 3 crossfires that will vary slightly, but still have the same type of format overall. For the first crossfire, it is important to note that only the first speakers can ask questions, and so you as the second speaker and the opponent's second speaker cannot participate, nor can you help your partner. During this time period, both first speakers will ask each other questions, and they will continually cross each other. Sometimes they might ask each other trap questions to try and get them to concede something, or maybe they'll ask each other questions for clarification about a specific number or piece of evidence. Whatever it may be, feel free to ask away, though the strategy that typically happens in Crossfire is that people try and trap their opponents to get them to make an early concession, so that way they can set themselves up for success in the total round. Now, after the Crossfire period ends, we get into the next speech, which is called the rebuttal. Now, before we actually do the rebuttal, it's important to talk about something called prep time, because this is most likely the first instance where you will probably be using it. Prep time in PF is exactly what it sounds like. It's time to prepare for your speech. You are given a total of 3 minutes between you and your partner during a full public forum debate round. And so usually people tend to use a minute before rebuttal just as a way to hone their arguments and prepare for giving their speech perfectly. Now, you can also use something called a running prep time instead of just asking for a minute of prep time. Running prep time is where you simply start the clock and don't end it until you're done prepping. This could be either 42 seconds, maybe over a minute, etc. However much time you need to take is however much you can take. And you don't have a time limit that you've set yourself, rather you're trusting that you'll pick the right time the minute that you want to stop. But let's just say that you as the second speaker only took a minute of prep time, and that's all you need to give your rebuttal. Now for the rebuttal itself, the construction of the speech is simple. The rebuttal is a 4-minute speech in which you simply attack your opponent's case. There is nothing else you need to do as the first rebuttal, and as we'll get into, it gets a little complex with the second rebuttal for the person who goes right after. But for this first rebuttal, since you are the first speaker, as in the order of the round, you will then have the perfect opportunity to capitalize and make sure that you deliver tons of arguments back and forth, constantly making sure that your opponents are berated with arguments and that they have little chance for breathing room. You want to set up as many arguments as you can so that way your opponents have a hard time dealing with all of them. The more arguments you have, and the more concise and cohesive they are, the harder they are for your opponents to deal with overall. Now, after you give your 4-minute rebuttal as the second speaker who's speaking first for our team, then the opponents will have a chance to go, and their second speaker will give their rebuttal. Now, for this second rebuttal, you have to make a key distinction between this one and the first rebuttal. The first rebuttal is only attacking, and that's all you do. But the second rebuttal also contains something else, called defending. In defending, not only do you have to acknowledge your opponent's arguments, but you also have to refute them and respond to them. So whatever your opponents said in their first rebuttal, you will have to respond to immediately after in your second rebuttal. And that means you don't have as much time to read arguments. But the good news is, you can take time to prepare during their rebuttal itself, which means that while you do have more time, you also have more ground to cover. And so it's sort of like a trade-off. And that's why a lot of times teams will pick first speaker over a second speaker in the round's order because they feel they have less to do. But if you're second speaker, the advantage is that you have more time overall in the round, and a lot of times you get the final say in terms of speeches. And so it just depends on what you prefer. Maybe you got unlucky and you don't get to pick your speaker order, but if you do, you should really think about why you want to pick a certain side or a certain speaker order, because it can really shape how you debate the round and make you feel uncomfortable or more comfortable. Now, a lot of people will also do something called weighing in their second rebuttal, but this is not as common. Though the second rebuttal will do weighing, and all weighing is comparing two arguments and seeing which one is better even if both are true. And so you would assume that both arguments are correct. And even if you have refuted their arguments, you would just assume in this case that they are both true. And once you assume that both of them are true, you would make the comparison as to why your argument is stronger than your opponent's. Maybe it could be something like the magnitude, like you should prefer our argument because we affect more lives and we save more people. Or you could even say something along the lines of, well, they are talking about money, whereas we're talking about real lives being lost, and lives being lost are irreversible, whereas money comes and goes as it pleases. Simple weighing mechanisms like that will often help you, and we can talk more about it in another video. Though for now, all you need to know is that it is technically part of the second rebuttal, though it is somewhat optional if you are still struggling for time and wanting to focus more on defending or attacking. Now, after both rebuttals, there will be the second crossfire. And this crossfire will be only between the second speakers of both teams, which means the first speaker cannot participate at all in this crossfire. Now, there is no difference from this cross besides who actually speaks, and the entire crossfire format is still the same, with 3 minutes being the total time for this period of cross, and the format of asking questions being the exact same, and trying to trap your opponents. Now, at this point, you probably don't want to be asking a ton of clarification questions, since the idea is that the first crossfire already cleared up everything for you to understand. Though if you are in desperate need of understanding something or else you risk losing the round, do not hesitate to ask for it and do not be shy about it, because oftentimes looking stupid is better than being absolutely wrong. Now, after the second crossfires have ended, we will get into a speech called the summary. And usually before the summary, you'd want to take a lot of prep time, sometimes even the rest of your prep time if you really need to. Because in my opinion, this speech is the single most important speech in all of public forum. You could name any other speech in this round, or any other speech in my opinion, I would say this is the most important speech. And so if you were the first speaker and you thought you had it easy, well, get ready, because this speech is the rebuttal, but much harder. The summary is given by the first speaker, and a lot of times I would recommend that you take 1 to 2 minutes of prep time before the speech and try and maximize as much prep time as you can, because you will not really need it for the speech after this. Now, this speech is simple on paper, but a lot harder to execute than you'd think. The summary is simply what you think it is: a summary of the entire round and an overview of how the round is going. The summary speech should contain the following. It should contain an extension of your case, reminding the judge and your opponents what your case is about and what your arguments are. It should contain defense to your opponent's rebuttal that they made in their second rebuttal, meaning that you not only refute their defense if you can, but also refute the attacks that they made against your case. Now, this is applicable for the first summary, might I remind you, so do not confuse it with the second summary, which is a little bit different, but still quite similar to the first summary. After you've done your defending, you will then move on to weighing. Now, if your opponent's waiting their second rebuttal, then this is a good time for you to respond to their weighing and also show why your side actually has the better weighing overall. But if they didn't weigh in their second rebuttal, then this is a good time for you to set up the weighing for this round and introduce it first thing first. Though after the weighing, the last thing you have to do is attack. All you have to do is restate your partner's attacks that still stand, or make some new attacks that might not have been in the round first, but might help you not only to respond to your opponents, but also help you to build some more offense for your case. Now, it's important to note that this is the last time that you are able to bring in new evidence / new offense. After this, you cannot bring in any new arguments, you cannot bring in any new piece of evidence, etc. After the first summary, the round is done with introducing new offense, and you can only summarize and explain what you already have on the table. Now, there's some other things that I didn't cover in this speech. When you are extending, you don't want to extend every single argument that you have. In this speech, you want to do something called collapsing. Now, all collapsing is you focus on one argument that you have and you really zoom in on it instead of looking at the bigger picture. You look at the smaller frame and you tell the judge and explain to the judge why out of all the arguments that you made, this one argument is the reason why you should win the round. Now, it's important to note that if your opponents have read a ton of attacks on your other arguments, you should still respond to them at least a little bit, though you shouldn't be concerned with too much defense on any of these other arguments, more so than you are on your only argument that you really want to go for in the round. Now, after you collapse, you want to make sure that you get to defending properly, and I would recommend defending after you extend and collapse, because it's a good way to make sure that your case is fully set, and that way you can also put your opponent's case on the back half of the speech. So this way, you're covering all your case in the first half of the speech, around the 1 minute and 30-second mark, and that way you're covering the other half of the round, which is your opponent's case, in the last 1 minute and 30 seconds of the round. This may sound a little complex, but also kind of simple if you think about it logically. But I promise you, you just have to get used to debating and actually giving the speech to understand how to give it better. And honestly, even I don't give perfect summaries. In fact, I mess up a lot. But the more and more you practice, the better you'll get at it. And the more you do it, the easier it gets as you go on. But that's just the first summary. After that is the second summary. And remember, you cannot bring in any new evidence or arguments at this point, so everything that is in the round is locked in. At this point, you are simply just responding to your opponent's summary. And so what you're going to do is, after you've taken your prep time and your speech begins, you're going to do the exact steps which I listed for the first summary, which, if you need a quick reminder and I haven't cemented it in your brain enough, it's extending/collapsing, attacking/defending, weighing, and then defending/attacking. Now, as I said earlier, the only thing you were doing was responding to your opponent's summary, and so you were simply responding to the evidence and the arguments that they brought in their speech. And so you can kind of use their speech as a tone for how the round is going to go. And you also use it as a way to kind of cement how you are going to actually view your own round strategy and what you are going to do. For example, if your opponent collapsed onto a specific argument, you may want to collapse on a different argument than what you were intending because it has a favorable matchup into the argument you're trying to counter. For example, with climate change, if your opponent is arguing for more renewable energy, you could bring up your argument about how renewable energy is largely ineffective and how governments are spending a whole lot of money on renewable energy. So that's just an example. A lot of times debates will be a lot more complex than you think, and you won't have enough time to actually dictate the round strategy as much as you think. And so you want to make quick decisions, but also feel free to pick what's comfortable to you and what you're best at overall. Now, after both summaries have occurred, you get into the final crossfire of the round, which is called the Grand Crossfire. Now, the Grand Crossfire is probably the most hectic part of the PF round, and for good reason too. The way the Grand Crossfire works is like every other crossfire, where it's 3 minutes and you get to ask questions to your opponents. Except this time, everybody has a turn to talk. And I mean everybody. You and your partner are able to answer questions from your opponents, and both of your opponents are also able to ask/answer questions as well. And so since everybody wants to ask/answer a question, a lot of times it can get very messy. And so you want to make sure that at least you and your own partner are on the same wavelength as to who wants to ask a question/answer a question. Now, of course, you can answer a question together and add in little parts maybe to your partner's answer if you feel like it. But a lot of times, it's better to just simply keep things orderly and let one person speak at a time so that way you don't get too lost in this crossfire, and so that way it doesn't just turn into a free-for-all for whoever has the loudest voice. Now, after this crossfire is the final speech of this round, and so feel free, if you want, to congratulate yourself because you have made it through this entire video, and I'm so thankful that you have because you are doing a great favor for yourself to get better at debate and to learn more about the activity as a whole. But enough of that, let's start talking and finishing up exactly everything you need to know about the PF round. As I said, the final speech is the final focus, and the final focus is quite simple. All you have to do is give the final outlook on the round, show the judge exactly what you're talking about, summarize the arguments like you did in the summary, and sort of, if not repeat what you said earlier, just in a more condensed form. The important things that you need to know about the speech is that it's always given by the second speaker of your team, and it is only 2 minutes long. And the reason I recommend that you spend most of your prep time earlier in the summary is because now you don't really need to do a lot if your summary was already good. Because if your summary had most of the stuff available, then all you need to do is take that summary and condense it down. Because really, the final focus is the exact same. You extend, you defend, then you weigh, and then you attack. And you repeat these things throughout. You are not introducing any new arguments at this point as a reminder, but you are simply restating the offense and the defense as well as your contentions and points that are already in the round and summarizing them and giving your judge a good reason why you should vote for them. You want to have some good one-liner at the end, and you want to make sure that your speech was memorable. A lot of times during the summary and rebuttal parts of the round, the judges will get really bored because it's so formulaic and no one's really interacting or giving a good pathos speech. They're just focusing on the ethos and the credibility of every argument rather than looking at the actual speech itself. But the final focus is a good way to shift from that. Focus on the pathos and the emotions that you pour out into the round, and explain to your judge and give your judge good reasoning why they should vote for you, and make them convinced that you are the better team overall, even if you might not be winning every argument or winning every part of the debate. Oh, and if it wasn't already obvious, the first final focus is very simple, where you kind of set the tone for the round and just make sure that you give a good summary of all your arguments. But the second final focus not only has to respond to the first final focus and sort of disprove it, but also give their own reasoning as to why the judge should vote for their side. And so, just like every other speech, the first kind of sets the tone for the round, and the second responds to the first and tries to set their own tone in advance. Now, after you finish the round and you shake your opponent's hand because you are respectful, the judge will then most likely give their decision, or if they don't, they'll post their decision on a site called Tabroom, which you'll find out in another episode about it, but it'll have all the things you need to know about your rounds and everything you need to know about your tournament. If, in any case, they do decide to give you feedback and disclose the round result the minute after the round ends or sometime after the round ends while you're still there, you want to make sure that you're silent and listening and that you're respectful to the judge and you don't make any big faces or emotions that make it seem like you're frustrated or that you're overly excited. You want to keep things formal because debate is a formal event, and you want to make sure that you are also respectful to your opponents even if you won or lost. And before we conclude this video, there's one last thing we have to talk about, which is flowing. Flowing is simply taking notes on your opponent's case or their arguments, and you should be doing this throughout almost every speech in the round, even crossfire if you are really skilled. Now, your flow should be simple. You usually want to take notes kind of going down in columns, and you want to have columns for almost every single speech. And I'll link a video of what flow paper should look like up here, but if you don't want to use that format, you could also use your own format and maybe work around with it a little bit. Though, if you don't know what to do and you're a little bit lost, or you just want something that's clean and orderly, I would highly recommend using this because it's very simple and it'll help you take notes on every speech and give you good ideas to what notes should look like and what you can do with your flow. But yeah, that's it for this video, and I sincerely hope that you've had a great time listening to me describe Public Forum and introduce it to you as the full event. I sincerely hope as well that you continue to stick around and stay with Blair Debate Academy as we continue to grow our channel and supply everybody with videos that are necessary for their own growth in not only Public Forum, but also in speaking and civic/engagement as a whole. Though for now, I will see you very soon. Peace.